This is Leadership Beyond, your community of conversation.
But this is the first time in my professional career that everybody, 100% of us, are consciously aware we are engaged in the change initiative.
Yeah, everything. I mean, COVID caused us all to go through change, right? At the same time, but our experiences were so different.
Facing these unprecedented times in isolation is pure insanity. Joining us today is Manal Keen. Manal had an amazing career in the financial service industry that included mortgage banking, treasury, wholesale payments, and wealth management. She reached a point in her career where just more work within financial services didn't make enough of a difference. She realized the need to use her experience, particularly to teach females that are a small percentage of that industry, finance and opportunities that exist in that field. And so she began a career teaching and mentoring females on financial services. During that time, serendipity led her to meet Adam Hergenrother and Haley Warner. And in meeting them, she saw and became passionate about the possibilities of the Founder and Force Multiplier to continue to educate, but to educate people involved in startups and in business how to use the Force Multiple principle in their strategic pursuits.
So we've all experienced the power of strong partnerships, and we can understand the need for both strategic planning and those runway tactics. Manal has such an energetic way to help us dig a little deeper into that and understand why both are so critical for success and what it means to create that strategic partnership in a strong way that's effective. She motivates us to join the movement. We're captivated.
And what particularly struck me is her insight into your generating ideas and being a strategic leader is going to run into the realities of the demand of the runway. And this is simply not possible unless we find a way to duplicate ourselves. And rather than let it happen, let's do it strategically. And Manal can help us to do just that. Welcome, Manal Keen. Good afternoon, Manal. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hi, Manal. We're happy to have you today with us.
Woo, woo. I am excited.
Yeah, we're excited to get started. So you are the CEO. I'm going to say you're the CEO of a movement founded by a blog and then book called The Founder and the Force Multiplier, right? That is authored by Adam, I'm going to say this wrong, Hergenrother?
You got it?
And Haley Warner.
Got it.
So can you tell us just how you got to know them and how that all turned into a movement now company?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey, and that'll put in place how I got to know Adam Hergenrother and Haley Warner, and how I'm CEO, Founder, and Force Multiplier today. Going back, I spent about the first 18 years of my career heading finance and strategy at large financial institutions in multiple industries across financial services. A year and a half ago, I decided that I really wanted to pursue my passions and make an impact and a difference in society. Being in the financial services industry and being a female minority, I realized that, there needs to be a little more attention to women and females in finance and decision-making roles. I'll throw out a stat out there, which is very interesting, but less than 2% of assets under management in North America are managed by females today. Yes, wow. Staggering number. So I went to teach. I'm an adjunct professor at the University of North Texas in Denton, Texas, where I got my bachelor's in finance. I'm the first female to teach investments there. I'm also part of the investment management board and part of a few outreach programs that are so amazing in the DFW Metroplex. focused on driving internship opportunities for females, minorities, and students in underserved communities. Usually large financial institutions or even small private equity asset management firms will grab individuals and students from large, four-year accreditable universities, but there's so much talent out there for those who don't have the opportunity. And so we're building that. We built out a financial literacy training and internship opportunities. So, I really wanted to plant the seeds today to help build a better future tomorrow. And so I did that for the first, I would say 8 months or 9 months, leaving my corporate comfort zone, I would say. But I definitely needed to get back into the workforce. So I still do all those things. And then, you know how they say that, kismet or karma, the universe connects you in different ways. And so I had met Adam Hergenrother a few years back. And this is so structural. It's so funny, but I basically helped put together financials for a startup that he had. And it was maybe a month of knowing each other, and we split apart, and that was it. Fast forward a year and a half later, he calls me up and he was like, "Hey, what are you doing these days?" And I was like, "Well, I'm kind of finding myself." And he's like, "Well, I wrote a book." And he wrote this book called Founder Force Multiplier. The book was in honor of the amazing strategic relationship Hallie and Adam share, and how he ended up being a serial entrepreneur, starting up 8+ companies because he had the right strategic partner by his side and was able to really focus and put his efforts into expanding and growing and finding and embracing entrepreneurship. And so when I heard, their story just was amazing. They literally started as, like you said, as a blog about, why their strategic partnership worked. They ended up, writing the book. Then they realized that it's not just their small business that they're expanding into multitudes of businesses, but this is something that impacts corporations, CEOs, executives. I mean, you name it. It's not a small business owner and their strategic relationship. It is a strategic relationship that can exist in almost any realm. And so the movement spoke to me. And I know in this pivotal sort of turn in my career, I am choosing purposefully to pursue passions. And when I went back to teach, and when I started building curriculums, and when I started making impacts to people's lives, I internally was feeling satisfied. And that spoke to me. So that, coupled with the movement, which is so amazing and speaks to me, he was like, "Hey, can you become CEO of this company and help me, run, monetize, and scale this entire concept?" So now, fast forward to today, which this is about 8 weeks ago that this happened.
Wow.
We've launched a podcast. We're about to launch a membership-based community platform. We're going to be, writing white papers and books, and we got a blog, and it's just a movement that's going to continue. We have cohort classes where we actually take force multipliers, chiefs of staffs, and EAs through a curriculum. I mean, you name it, we're going to be doing it. And it's really exciting. We're in the infancy phase. We are in startup mode and growing. And it's been an amazing movement.
That's amazing. I mean, I can feel your energy, which I bet you didn't take to the bank.
Right. Right. I mean, sometimes you lose your mojo. So you gotta bring it back.
You gotta
right?
reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
Aligned with what you care most about.
Exactly. And that's important. I will tell you, I watched this TED Talk called The Pursuit of Happiness. It's also a book by Sean Anker. And it's an amazing book that basically, and the TED Talk, it gives you goosebumps, but it basically says that we as humans identify happiness as a moment or a phase in our life or an accomplishment. But once we get to that point, we basically up the ante or change what our happiness is, and we move it to the next thing. But in perpetuity, humans don't achieve happiness because we're always looking for the next thing. we're not embracing what actually moves us today, what our passions are, what makes us happy, and how to go pursue life with that in mind. And I that spoke to me, and I have made a lot of life changes since actually listening to that TED Talk.
Well, in listening to your story, it was clear that Adam had a force multiplier, but we really don't know exactly what a force multiplier is. Could you give us a little bit of context?
Yes. So, in a nutshell, a force multiplier is a leader's right hand. They not only help them bring the vision together, but also execute on the vision. So, they basically pull all the pieces together to achieve the North Star of the CEO slash the company, right? And what happens is, we've all been there, right? You're, let's say, head of marketing, head of sales, head of a specific product, right? And you're in the day to day. It's really hard sometimes to look up and be like, oh, this is the company's North Star, and all my actions and initiatives and priorities are driving towards the North Star, right? It's hard because you're in the day to day and in the trenches and client experience and you name it, right? And so a chief of staff is somebody that kind of can live above that and horizontally bring together all the pieces with the right metrics in place, with the right priorities, communication, and driving how everything flows into the North Star. And a lot of times, and I hope while people are listening to this, they're like, oh, that's exactly what I'm missing.
Right.
Because everybody gets entrenched into their role. So it is very hard
You
to
do the
sort
doing.
of, right?
Mhm.
Right, exactly. And it's very hard to bring it up and actually bring everything together. And I tell people this all the time when they ask me, well, I mean, it's going to cost me X and X and X to get a, chief of staff, or maybe an EA and a chief of staff, or just an EA. There's so many startups that are, living and breathing without an EA, right? And I'm like, yes, but here goes my finance hat, right? I'm like, but what's the ROI of your investment? Today, you're going to take, let's say, a new technology and say it's going to cost me XXX, but the implications, the efficiencies, the output, and how much I'm able to produce is going to bring me so much, which means I've covered the cost of the technology and multiplied the effect, right?
Mhm.
That's sort of the common way we think about it, but we don't think about the human aspect of when we are driving growth and change and scale, what that means and how it impacts. And that's why a lot of companies, and Adrian, you probably know this really well, but that's why a lot of corporations, when they're trying to make change, they end up having challenges that they didn't expect. And they're usually around human behavior and adoption of change.
Right.
Right. And we miss that aspect. We miss that whole sort of aspect of why behind the things we do. And having, cohesion, communication, less gray, I would say. Gray creates anxiety and a little angst with individuals. And having clarity and everybody understanding the direction and the why behind it is such an impact to companies, businesses, growth strategies, you name it. And that's what a force multiplier helps do for their CEO and their company.
Yeah, it always amazes me that, it's so easy to make a decision to spend lots and lots of money on a technology. But then when you talk about let's invest in people, oh no, we don't have the budget for that, right? We'll figure it out. You shouldn't need to have somebody thinking about the people, really. People are your strongest investment, right? Because they're the ones that are using that technology or process or system. And so why are we not? I mean, it always, it just continues to amaze me. It continues to keep me very busy, which I guess is a good thing, except I'd rather just have leaders understand that power, right? And
Right.
so the movement that you're all embarking on is creating these strategic partnerships. Is there something that you have found, the qualities that make that partnership strong? What are those qualities?
Yeah. I feel like, to really bring out the partnership, it's very important to realize that, and I believe this in all strategic partnerships, that you really have one goal. You have one set of metrics. You have one set of vision and achievement, except two people are doing it, or three people, or whatever it may be, right? I feel like we forget often that it's a shared, united vision. And for a strategic partnership to work, you both have to be fully embedded and vested in that mission and vision, right? That makes a difference. As a human being, when you feel strongly about something, or when you have passion about it, or you believe in it, it is human nature. We tend to put more passion into it. We tend to think about it more. We tend to draw and drive to execution better, right? That is just the way we're geared. We're not robots. As much as people want to think we are not robots. And I think that's one, right? Having the clarity and the setting the expectations that are united and both believing in it. And that's why when you're looking for a chief of staff or an EA, actually talking, and it's not in the interview process, it's not common, but actually talking about, the vision, and do you both agree with it, and setting the expectations, and that, in order to achieve this, we're going to have to do X, Y, and Z. Is this something that you are wanting to do, right? I think those questions are missed sometimes. And I think that's important in a partnership, right? I also think that strong communication, right? Having an open mind, ability to take constructive feedback, and also ability to influence each other. Relationships generally, whether it's professional or personal, the foundation of strategic partnerships are really based on the core of having clear expectations, clear communication, and really driving towards the same goals. That's what creates strength, and that's what creates achievement and execution and ability to multiply yourselves.
And so as I hear that, I hear about a leadership filtration system. There might be some executive assistants who really only want to be task managers.
Yeah.
And that has value, but that's not, just be clear, that's what that is. And that's reflected in the way they're paid and also in the way they're part of the strategic partnership.
Yes. And I think it's important. So, in the book, Founder Force Multiplier, Hallie and Adam sort of talk about their story, but she wasn't hired as his, chief of staff. She was hired. So the Adam Hergenrother companies, they have a real estate arm. And so she was hired as a listing assistant. Quickly, it came to light that she really was in the wrong role. She could do the role amazingly, but it wasn't the role that moved her. And then so she moved into, sort of like an EA / chief of staff role. I think Adam had an EA at that time that was actually excellent to be a listing assistant. And so he actually brought them into a room, and he's like, as a leader, he was like, you guys are amazing, both of you. But if we switch the roles, I think you guys might actually find yourselves at a better place. And so I think I didn't know, it just kind of worked out for them, but they talked through it and they switched roles, and they are all together today, and they're still multiplying, and they're from 1 to 8 companies and 12 years as a strategic partnership. There's so much to learn from them, but I think understanding and knowing what you want to do, what your skill sets are. And I will say, especially for executive assistants, it's okay to also set expectations of what you want your role to be. And as an EA, that, there are different types of EAs and multitudes of direction an EA's career can take. So that's why really being open and setting, and I know this is something, Tom, you probably teach a lot, setting career stepping stones, right? And not only having task-oriented developmental one-on-ones, but also what are your personal goals and your growth look like? And what are the courses or knowledge or expansion or experience you need, and the transferable skills to get to those stepping stone career goals, which we don't do enough of. And I think,
amen.
Right.
Yes.
And the silent resignation, honestly, there's a lot we have to look at ourselves as leaders, because these are pieces that were missing, but they're sort of amplified today. And it's important that we go back to some of the foundation and focus on that.
Yeah. So that's one of the limitations of the old performance reviews is we're evaluating the last 12 months or 6 months, and we can say she's performing, but using Adrian's sailing metaphor, where are you going? Where do you want to go? What would growth look like for you? So, and somebody might decide, I'm happy in this season of my life managing the tasks and keeping things falling through the cracks, and that's okay. But if you don't have that communication, then you don't know.
Exactly.
What is the other role there? So you mentioned executive assistant and you mentioned chief of staff, and you had 3 roles in there that are force multipliers.
I mean, so traditionally, I would say a lot of chiefs of staffs today, in essence, probably are your, in some of the older roles, like your chief operations officers, I would say, right? Yes. And now the roles are being split a little because as a chief operations officer, you're really focused on the internal and external controls and ensuring that the processes are in place to hit our production targets, technology targets, financial targets, right? So it's a lot of what a chief of staff does, but on a sort of different realm. One is more in the execution do mode, and the other one's more in the strategic, how do we bring the rest of the lines of business to make this goal achievable and attainable? And I think they've been kind of fluid over the years, and it's being defined quite, I would say purposefully more today than it had been in the past.
Right.
If you think about it, chiefs of staff, the role actually originated from governments and militaries. They were not corporate roles, right? And today, that same concept and notion is being taken and brought into corporations. And I think that's where people are seeing the impact and the beauty of it.
So do you have some examples in either your personal experience or those that you've interviewed as you've done research on these strategic partnerships of bad partnerships? Like, it's like the opposite. I mean, we don't want to lean on the negative, but like sometimes it's like, well, here, what not to do, right? It's the what not to wear, what not to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes you learn the best things from reflecting on those.
Yeah.
So do you have any that come to mind that are just like, wow, that was just bad?
Yeah. I would say so. I mean, I would say in my experience, and even myself, having strategic partners in the past also, or being a strategic partner, I feel one of the biggest moments or where I have seen where it does not work is when there's really a big misalignment in expectations of a role. I think that's the number one reason you will usually see a not effective strategic partnership. And then the other piece I feel is also the not really understanding the expectation of the role mostly flows into being in a role that you do not want to be in, right? Subconsciously, if you are in a role that is not moving you, is not helping you grow, or you are not challenged, or it's just not hitting the pieces that really move you as a person, then you can do it for a certain time. And you may be like, I know I have been in roles where I was like, it wasn't the role for me, but I gave 200% and I'm an overachiever. So I'm always going to give 200%. But even at that, you hit a wall. There comes a point where you lose motivation. We are humans, right?
You lose fire.
Yeah. And then
not feeding your soul.
Exactly. And then as some, and I'm sure we're all like this on this call, like overachievers, that is where you are in this burnout age, because you've been burnt out in a role that you didn't want to be in. Now, granted, I'm not taking away from the fact that sometimes we are in situations, we have dependents, or, we have to be we are in our job because we don't have a way out. I don't want to take away from that, because we are all in those places, and we have been once in our life, or maybe some are in it and it's hard for them to get out, right? And it's easy for someone to say, well, go do this and go do this certification, but you don't know what people's lives are like and what's around them and dependencies outside. So I usually, when people come to me for some mentoring and they are in those roles, I usually help them see that there are ways within the role you're in that you may not feel that you're fit for, to create the space to have transferable skills for the roles you do want to go for. And like simple things, like if you have, let's say, 30-minute mentoring session a month with another internal executive, make it specific. So I'll give an example. When I started my career, I started in the mortgage industry and home lending. I had a great career, but I spent my first 10 years in that career. And I got to a point where I'm like, I want to learn. I want to change. I want to go into the IB, the investment bank. I want to go into treasury, M&A. Like, I love these kind of things. So I did not have time. I was a mother of two. I have a, large family, lots of dependents. I was working full time. I was managing 300 people in the role I was in mortgage, managing short sales. So, and I was doing my MBA. Let me just throw that in there. So I did not.
By the way.
Yeah, let me throw that in there. So my time, there was no time. There wasn't like, oh, Manal, go and, do X, Y, and Z, and you will get to the IB. So I had 2 mentoring sessions a month, and I changed my mentors and found mentors that were in the investment bank. And I leveraged that time outside of my industry and the realm I was in to learn and have a voice in a different place. I joined virtual and virtual wasn't big, by the way, in like the mid 2000s, but there were like internal virtual events. And I even created them when there weren't like them. I was like reaching out to people in the IB. I'm like, hey, we have this in common. Why don't we create an internal group? And these are just examples, but if you really want to make a change, I would say just give yourself a chance.
I love that example. And we have time for one more question. The time goes fast talking to you just because it's so energetic, your vibrant energy. But you mentioned the word time. So if you would, talk about the classic Pareto principle and how force multiplier is a way to not only generate value, but also protect time.
Yes. So the principle, for those who don't know, basically states that usually you have 20% of your work, the most impactful work, leads to 80% of your output, right? And when you are in a mode, especially startup mode, you're an executive with lots of initiatives and priorities, and you're doing it all yourself or having to roll up your sleeves and do it all. It's great for the short term because, usually you're scrappy until you get, you
save money.
Somebody you save money, right? So it's understandable, but there comes a point where you are not focused on what the strategy is for growth. You're not going out there and doing business development to scale your business. You're not having the ability to sit back and reflect on, am I driving the right direction and processes in order to get to the goals and targets that we've set for ourselves? And so when business owners and executives are in that phase, that's when you'll see there's a lot of, you've been there, right? You're overwhelmed, you're burned out, you're feeling like there's no silver lining, and you're really not spending your time on the most impactful 20%, right? And so and even if you're a startup and you right now do not have the means to hire somebody, you got to then think about, okay, where can I maybe have part-time help, and where's that ROI and what's it going to do? So this part-time help that'll cost me X, how much more in business development and scale can I do? And how will that grow my revenue? You'll start realizing you're going to start generating more revenue because you're focused on revenue generating 20% vision and tasks. And then as that revenue grows, now you're able to scale and have a strategic partner by your side and then continue to grow and multiply yourselves. So I think that's sort of the importance of time and time management and understanding that you just because you're doing a lot and working hard, which there is nothing to take away from that, is super admirable and honorable, but it is going to hinder you. At some point, you're going to hit a plateau. And you have to realize and understand when is that plateau moment, And when is that pivot so you can establish and really grow, right? About less than 15% of startups actually make it past pre-seed funding. And the number one reason that they can't make it past pre-seed funding is usually around ability to go out there and what do most pre-seed startup owners have to do? Founders have to do. They have to go out and get funding. Well, in order to go funding, you have to build a name for yourself. You have to go build a brand. You have to go do business development. You have to be a thought leader. You have to go and, put together an influence and have the right pitch decks. And if you're entrenched in the day-to-day and the administrative burden and tasks, because they have to get that done, you are unable to cast your vision.
You don't make
do the
space
things you need to.
for what's going to bring you there.
You got it. You got it.
So tell our listeners where to go to. We'll also post it in the show notes, but for those that are listening, how do they find out more about you and Force Multiplier?
Awesome. So definitely LinkedIn, website, and Instagram. If you put in the Founder and the Force Multiplier, we will pop up. If you go anywhere where podcasts are streamed, the Founder and Force Multiplier by Manal Keen is streaming on all platforms. We coming soon. This is a little new, the unveiling. But in the next few weeks, we're also going to launch a community platform so we can really drive this movement and help make an impact in today's society.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and just thank you for all the work that you're doing, for this movement, but also, what you're bringing to youth and those communities. I mean, it's an amazing thing that you had the courage to step away from a long career and do something that fulfills you and is going to be, help to make the world a better place. Like, just amazing. Amazing. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Beyond podcast. We hope you benefited from this conversation as much as we have. We invite you to join our community of conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to sign up at aleadershipbeyond.com for free materials and updates. That's aleadershipbeyond.com. Join us in 2 weeks for our next episode.